Hello and welcome to World 360 with me, Ayushman Singh Jambal. On the show today, we decode the top international stories making waves across the globe. From the war between Israel and Hamas to the tumultuous elections in Pakistan to the impact of the death of Russian opposition leader Navalny, we get you the crux of the stories setting the global agenda. Now to our top story, ladies and gentlemen. The United States has vetoed another United Nations Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire and an end to Israel's war on Gaza. But the US blocked the demand for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and was the only country to vote against the resolution, while the United Kingdom abstained. The UN Security Council's 13 other member countries voted in favor of the resolution demanding a halt to the war. China and Russia slammed the United States for the veto. China's envoy to the United Nations expressed a strong disappointment and dissatisfaction with the US, while Russia's ambassador to the UN said that the US veto marked another black page in the history of the Security Council. Remember, according to Palestinian authorities, over 29,000 people have been killed in Gaza and over 80% of the population has been displaced with the onslaught by the IDF and Israel's continuing offensive and its vow to eradicate Hamas.
A draft resolution at the United Nations Security Council calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza was vetoed by the United States on Tuesday.
Those against?
It was the third such veto since the start of the Israel-Hamas war.
Abstentions?
Britain abstained, while the 13 other council members all voted in favor of the drafted text.
Proceeding with a vote today was wishful and irresponsible.
U.S. Ambassador to the UN Linda Thomas-Greenfield told the 15-member body that the draft resolution could jeopardize ongoing ceasefire talks between the U.S., Egypt, Israel, and Qatar.
We believe that the resolution on the table right now would, in fact, negatively impact those negotiations. Demanding an immediate, unconditional ceasefire without an agreement requiring Hamas to release the hostages will not bring about a durable peace. Instead, it could extend the fighting between Hamas and Israel.
According to text seen by Reuters, the U.S. has proposed a rival draft resolution calling for a temporary ceasefire, quote, as soon as practicable, and on the condition that all hostages are released. The blocked draft resolution, which was drawn up by Algeria, did not link a ceasefire to the release of hostages. Here's Algeria's UN ambassador.
Voting against it implies an endorsement of the brutal violence.
Israel's UN ambassador said the word ceasefire was being mentioned as if it was, quote, a magical solution.
What exactly will this silver bullet ceasefire achieve? A ceasefire achieves one thing and one thing only: the survival of Hamas.
Palestine's UN ambassador said blocking the Algerian drafted resolution would mean more horrors in a war that health authorities in Gaza say has killed nearly 29,000 Palestinians.
The message given today to Israel with this veto is that it can continue to get away with murder.
Outside the UN headquarters in New York, protesters called on the U.S. to back the resolution. Washington traditionally shields Israel from UN action and has been averse to the word ceasefire in any resolution. But the draft resolution it proposed could signal a shift, as the U.S. text echoes language that President Joe Biden said he used last week in extensive talks with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in which he pushed for a temporary ceasefire.
Now let's get to our guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm joined by Mohammed Najib, Palestine journalist as well as defense analyst, as well as Irina Sukuman, national security lawyer and geopolitical analyst. Mohammed Najib, I'll come to you first. When it comes to this pitch from the United States that they would definitely veto a resolution to call for a ceasefire because it did not call for the immediate release of the hostages still in the custody of Hamas. Isn't that a valid pitch to make at the United Nations, given the fact that Hamas continues to hold several Israelis hostage and have refused to let them go till Israel ends the offensive on the Gaza Strip? At the end of the day, this was an unprovoked attack by Hamas.
Actually, this is the third time the United States used the veto or obstruct resolution at the UN Security Council since the outbreak of the war in October 23. And here it's strongly condemned by the Palestinian officials as well as the Palestinian Justice Minister Mohammed Shilaldi said that move by the United States make it a partner in the Israeli starvation of the 2.3 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Actually, the resolution, the proposal said that they call for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza and to free all the hostages without any condition, unconditionally free of the hostages. And they said that Israel should stop the forcible displacement of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and to allow the arrival of the humanitarian assistance to the civilians in Gaza. And I don't know how this will obstruct the United States' effort to reach a civilized ceasefire by the starvation of the Palestinians, how this will help. I think that will help if the decision are approved and supported, because that's very important. Now the situation are catastrophic in Gaza. More than 29,000 Palestinians killed and another 69,000 injured.
But Mr. Najib, are you saying that the resolution did mandate the immediate release of Israeli hostages? Because the US says that unless that was on the table, they are not going to support a resolution.
The Algerian proposal said that free of all the detained immediately and without any conditions. And that means about the Israelis. So it's not about something else. And also it said for humanitarian reasons and to allow the arrival of humanitarian aid to the civilians in Gaza. There are 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza. Not all of them are Hamas or were engaged in war against Israel. So those civilians punished because they did nothing wrong or they didn't commit any crime against Israel. So that's the international community responsibility to allow the arrival of the food. Even inside Israel, there are voices.
One sec. I think
the civilians.
Right. I think we need clarification on that. Irina Sukuman, my friend over here, Mohammed Najib, is saying that the Algerian resolution did call at the end of the day for the release of the hostages by Hamas, and what the United States has done is completely unjustified when it comes to protecting the lives of civilians in the Gaza Strip. How do you react to that?
Well, that's simply not true. If you look at the text of the resolution, it clearly does not state that, and I don't see how anyone could possibly interpret that. Moreover, none of the other members have pushed and called for Hamas to release the hostages. It's simply factually not true, and anyone who can read can see that directly. The U.S. is completely justified in making that a very common sense condition.
Right. Mohammed Najib, how do you react? It's completely untrue about the fact that the resolution called for the release of hostages. None of the countries which supported the resolution called for the release of hostages. None of the Muslim countries in the Middle East have called for the release of hostages. All everyone keeps talking about is the situation in Palestine. At the end of the day, Israel has vowed to eradicate Hamas. Hamas committed a very gruesome crime on the 7th of October, entering Israeli homes, murdering women and children. At the end of the day, this was bound to happen. Israel was not going to take this lying down. And at the end of the day, if the vow is to end Hamas, the United States will support its longtime ally.
First of all, we should separate between the Israeli war against Hamas and between the sufferance of the civilians. I am talking about the sufferance of the civilians in Gaza who were displaced, who suffer of starvation. I'm not talking about or defending Hamas fighters who were engaged in 7 October or abducted the Israelis or killing the Israelis or firing missiles against the Israelis, because they also all of us here against the targeting of Israeli civilians. It's unacceptable.
But Mohammed Najib, Mohammed Najib, before I let you finish, I remember there were these visuals at the beginning of the attack, against Israel on the 7th of October. I remember those visuals which went viral on social media, where the bodies of Israeli civilians were paraded on the streets of Gaza, and you had men, women, and children throwing garbage at those bodies, spitting at those bodies as they were being paraded on the streets of Gaza. Who were those people who were parading those bodies on the streets of Gaza?
I didn't remember which bodies you talk about. You mean Israelis or Palestinians?
No, Palestinians.
In Gaza.
In Gaza. Remember, the Israelis were taken away from Israel and taken into Gaza by Hamas fighters. They were murdered and their bodies were paraded on the streets. You had men, women and children throwing garbage at those bodies, spitting at those bodies as they were being paraded on the streets of Gaza. Who were those people who were doing that?
I heard about that Israel turned the dead bodies of Palestinians through trucks to Gaza to be buried there in a collective
So it's a conspiracy in your opinion?
But those may be killed inside Israel or arrested or they from the north, or maybe they found in the streets and taken to Israel to test either they are Israeli hostages or they are Palestinians. But that's what my information are about. What's happened twice or three times in Gaza during the past 2 months.
Right. And I also want to understand why hasn't there been, given the atrocities committed by Hamas against Israel, why hasn't, in your opinion, there been a public uprising against Hamas to stop the atrocities against Israel, given the fact that it has led to something like this? Hamas was democratically elected by the people of by the people of Gaza. They drove out the other political authorities inside Gaza. Now, at the end of the day, if you are a democratically elected authority and you wage war on another country, you launch a terror attack on another country, there will be a price to pay. Hellfire will be rained on you. And that's exactly what is happening.
I think the Palestinians elected Hamas, the political wing of Hamas, not the Aziz al-Qassam. I don't think Aziz al-Qassam is public or known. No one known who's joined the Aziz al-Qassam, the military wing of Hamas, who conducted the attack against Israel. So that is a secret organization. No one knows about it. Even the family members don't know who is joining or who is not joining. But the Palestinians vote for about political vision of the Hamas against the Palestinian Authority. It's not about other issues. And it was in 2006. But since that time, it was Hamas taking over Gaza, and in 2007, killing some Palestinians. So the Palestinians changed their mood that time, and the Palestinian Authority is the only representative of the Palestinians here in the West Bank. It's not Hamas, the representative, because Abbas has dismantled the Palestinian Legislative Council that was elected by Hamas, and Hamas was the majority, and they dismissed the spokesperson of the Legislative Council. So Hamas is just ruling Gaza, and they get support from Qatar and from Israel until the 7th of October. It's not the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority here has nothing to do with that except supporting the health and education and electricity.
Right, but you bring up a very interesting point, Irina, and I'll give you the final word on that. What Mr. Najib is saying, at the end of the day, the same way how the United States raised the Taliban, and that came to bite the United States when it comes to floating a terror organization to take on the USSR. Similarly, that's what's happened in Israel. That is the point being made by Mr. Najib, that Israel allowed Hamas to thrive, to build its arsenal up, and now Israel has paid the price over allowing Hamas to thrive and build its infrastructure up. And the culmination of all of that was what happened on October 7th. How do you react to that?
Employing Qatar as an intermediary was a mistake, as is trying to make deals with Hamas was also a mistake. But it was a mistake in an effort to save civilian lives on both sides. I fully expect every country that benefited from Qatar's ill-begotten donations to return them, since Mr. Najib finds it such a critical contribution to Hamas's uprising, and he's completely correct. But I don't see any groups now asking Qatar to be removed from this process, despite the fact that it continues to be detrimental, if nothing else, and certainly not helpful. That said, had Israel conducted operations against Hamas earlier, yes, it may have saved many lives, but I think the outcry would have been very similar, because Hamas's propaganda machine is ultimately not about saving Palestinian lives, as about eradicating Israel. And this is what we are hearing today, because if people cared about Palestinian lives as much as they claim that they are, they would have been working with Israel to help eradicate Hamas, to help save Palestinian lives, and not encouraging propaganda by Gaza Health Ministry, and not encouraging Hamas to take its own people and use them as cannon fodder, while their leaders run through tunnels like rats.
Right.
Or worse yet, reside in Doha in luxury hotels and direct these massacres and atrocities from far away.
Right. So that is the reality that the people of Palestine have to, have to square with at the end of the day, that those people that they voted for, those people that have support inside Palestine, they have led to this situation by attacking Israel on October 7th. At the same time, Israel also has to ask itself, how was this terror infrastructure allowed to thrive for so many years? We'll leave it at that. Muhammad Najib, Palestine journalist and defense analyst, and Irina Sukuman, national security lawyer and geopolitical analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.